Over on Channel 4 at 10:30 tonight, Jonathan Ross returns with a new series of The Last Resort. While at 11:15, the greatest sporting show on earth gets underway. The Olympics 1988 begins.
Picked for the Olympics but stranded, has Lisa lost her chance? The Chancellor faces inflation at 5.7% and rising. The devastation the hurricane visited on Jamaica. The British helicopter crews that are helping in Bangladesh. And Worcestershire without Botham are champions by 1 point. Good evening. A young gymnast, just 15, got a last-minute place in the British Olympic team today. But she couldn't get on a flight to Seoul in time, and though ITN is helping now, she may be disqualified. Lisa Grayson was on holiday in Devon, but the Olympic officials didn't know where she was. Police eventually found her at a zoo in Paynton, but an RAF helicopter didn't get there in time to get her to London to catch her plane. ITN has booked her on a flight to get her to Korea on Sunday, but the British team doctors say a later flight means she won't be fit enough to compete on Monday.
15-year-old Lisa Grayson has long been the star of her gym class at Rye Hill School in Redcar. After success in European Championships, it was a blow to discover that she hadn't made the Olympic team. But this afternoon she was arriving at Exeter Airport by police car, with those hopes alive once more. A last-minute leg injury to women's team captain Karen Kennedy had launched frantic efforts to find Lisa and get her to Seoul in time. Now plucked from a family holiday, she could hardly believe her luck.
I was told when I was at national training that I might be sent for, but I was meant to just work in.
How do you feel at this moment?
Surprised and excited.
But minutes later the smiles had gone. Plans to fly her to Heathrow by helicopter were in doubt, and that meant Lisa couldn't reach the all-important Seoul flight in time. Phone calls to her coach confirmed that the team doctor had ruled Lisa must have 24 hours to recover from jet lag before being able to compete.
What did you think about the possibility of a flight that got you into Seoul at 17:10 on Sunday, Korean time?
I wouldn't be allowed to compete. The doctor wouldn't let me.
Would you want to compete?
Yeah,
I mean, how much did it mean to you to go?
a lot. That was what I was aiming for.
Well, with or without Lisa, the Olympics finally get underway in just a few hours' time. Thousands have turned out on the streets of Seoul to see the famous torch arrive. The security forces, too, are limbering up for the opening ceremony.
On the eve of the Olympics, Korea is a country on full alert. For the next fortnight, they'll be staging the most heavily guarded games in history. On the streets of Seoul, police say they're ready for anything, from tourists to terrorists.
No problem. We are here, no terrorists. We are well-trained terrorist policemen, very good.
100,000 police will be on duty. Today, a final briefing for the squads in blue. At tomorrow's opening ceremony, they'll be watching over 100,000 people who'll fill every seat of the Olympic Stadium in Seoul. As the arrival of the torch lit up the center of Seoul tonight, South Koreans were hoping that from now on, the sheer spectacle of the Games will eclipse any worries about security. They've waited 7 years for this moment, and they intend to welcome the world in peace.
In less than 2 hours' time, the 24th Olympiad will get underway. Only then will come the real test of all the years of planning and policing that have gone into making this the most successful sporting show on earth. Jeremy Thompson, News at 10 at the Seoul Olympics.
Here, inflation is at its highest since 1985, and it's forecast to go on rising. The 5.7% figure for the year to August is up nearly 1 full point. There are higher wage demands and higher mortgage repayments still to come. The Chancellor, who broke the news of a bad figure on Wednesday, calls it a temporary blip. The opposition parties blame his policies. Inflation last hit 5.7% nearly 3 years ago. It fell to 2.4% in the summer of '86, went back over 4% for most of '87, recovered this spring, before climbing again to 5.7% today.
Britain's economy is growing fast, too fast for comfort. City economists are worried by the prospects of rising wages and inflation. Since June, the government's been using higher interest rates to make borrowing more expensive and reduce demand, so controlling inflation. As yet, as those inflation figures show, it hasn't worked. For one unpleasant side effect of using high interest rates in this way is to push up mortgage rates, which in turn pushes up the inflation figures, thus adding to the whole inflationary problem. Nigel Lawson says the figures are a temporary blip, but the rise is deeply embarrassing. It was only 2 years ago that he told Conservatives he aimed to eliminate inflation. Control of inflation is the most crucial part of the government's economic policy, and the Labour Party has today seized on this latest figure.
There has been a credit explosion. There has been the consumption boom. They have brought about a balance of payments crisis. The Chancellor has himself put interest rates up, and that started inflation spiralling again. This is exactly the direct result of government folly.
There are clearly inflationary pressures in the economy due to its very ebullience and strength, and we're determined to keep pressure bearing down on inflation, and the means to do that is the rise in the interest rate.
Britain is well down the International Inflation League, headed by Japan, at just 0.5%, and all the other countries in the top industrial 7 have inflation rates below Britain's, although none of them include mortgage rates in their figures. And this country's figures are set to get worse, at least in the short term.
In the short run, I think we'd like to see a continued pick-up in inflation. There's another mortgage rate impact in October. It'll probably reach 6% then and probably peak a little bit afterwards. But beyond that, provided interest rates don't go beyond 12%, I think we could see an inflation coming down, and by the end of next year it could well be down to 4%.
Ministers will hope he's right, but workers beginning annual pay talks will want rises which at least match inflation, which will add to pressures, and there's no sign yet that interest rate rises have curbed Britain's high spending habits.
The vision is of a Britain drunk on credit, a credit binge egged on by deregulation, relaxed controls on borrowing, and irresponsible credit companies encouraging people to spend more than they can afford. The reality is perhaps a little less lurid, but the government is increasingly worried that its prudence in public sector spending is not being matched in the marketplace. The Chancellor says he's particularly concerned about borrowing on plastic, though that's not the major source of credit. The rising value of houses and the ability to borrow against that for other spending has provided the biggest surge. The latest breakdown on outstanding consumer debt shows the major bank credit cards accounted for 15%, less than half the personal bank loans, 34%, HP and other specialist credit houses were 41%, with outstanding debts with the retailers 7%. Shopkeepers and customers alike are concerned about spiralling credit.
Everybody's crazy, materialistically. They're all sort of, because somebody's got a 27-inch telly, I've got to have a 33-inch telly, whether you can afford it or not. That doesn't mean a thing, Everybody's into spend.
I went off to Australia on my credit card about 2 years ago, and it's taken me until now to pay it off.
I always find if you don't pay it off all in one go, the interest is very high.
Do you have any credit cards? I do, but it's stuck on a wall at home, so I can't use it anymore.
Major card companies are sensitive to accusations that they charge too much in interest.
45% of our customers pay no interest at all. And an increasing number of them use the card as a charge card, getting the benefits of up to 56 days of free credit.
Dearer money should eventually curb spending, but among many shoppers the mood is still spend now, pay later. Michael Green, News at 10, Central London.
Hurricane Gilbert is about an hour away from hitting Mexico and Texas with wind speeds of 120 miles an hour. Cities along the Gulf of Mexico are virtually deserted as tens of thousands of people flee from the approaching hurricane.
Along the Gulf Coast of Texas and Mexico, they're waiting and watching for the coming storm, now expected to hit land within the next few hours. Beach resorts like Corpus Christi, Texas, are almost deserted, its residents joining an estimated 200,000 people who've already fled the area. Those who are left behind have been stocking up on food and water, listening on portable radios for news as they pack shelters to overflowing. Many admit they're scared.
Fear of the death toll is one of the worst to ever hit in this century. We've never experienced anything like this here in Brownsville.
The Texas Air Guard were called in to evacuate a hospital for the mentally handicapped. 400 youngsters flown to safety inland. Even prisons along the coast have been emptied. Fishing fleets have all returned to harbour, some even taking to the roads as their owners seek a safer haven. Boats have been buried in holes in the ground, even sunk at their moorings to avoid the storm's fury. In Mexico's Yucatan Peninsula, it's now known that at least 5 people died as the coastal resort area took the full brunt of the storm on Wednesday. Scores of luxury hotels and apartment buildings in Cancun have been damaged. It's estimated that some 100,000 people are now homeless. A silent witness to the hurricane's power, this coaster swept ashore. It nearly demolished a hotel. Hurricane Gilbert has been tracked all the way by Weather Service planes measuring winds of up to 200 miles an hour. And wind like that can devastate property, even kill people. In the University of Maryland wind tunnel, we're now standing in a 40-mile-an-hour gale. It's actually a very stiff breeze, but you can certainly feel it, right?
Yes, it's really about as much as you want to walk around in, I would think.
Okay, let's try 50 now. Okay. Now, at this kind of speed, it's obviously already it's not safe for people to be in the street, right?
That's right. At this speed, you would have lots of possible flying objects, which, even though we can walk in the wind, things would hit you that would be very...
I mean, we're talking about Gilbert with winds of maybe 3 or 4 times this intensity.
That's right, and the forces would be like 4 to 8 times as much.
Okay, we're now building up to 70 miles an hour. It's almost as much as you can do to stand up. You can lean as far forward as you like, and I feel myself sliding away even now. And don't forget that we're talking about Gilbert with speeds of something like maybe up to 200 miles an hour. I'm actually getting blown away on my shoes right now. And the hurricane winds will be at least twice this intensity. Ken Reese, News at 10, Washington.
Hurricane Gilbert announced its imminent arrival in Brownsville, Texas, a short while ago. The first of its savage winds lashing a town that has battened down as best it can, but is looking increasingly defenseless. Most of its residents have fled to safety inland, leaving their homes and businesses protected as best they can. But the early signs are that damage will be severe. Winds of up to 120 miles an hour are forecast, and it could be much worse. And there'll be torrential rain, bringing floods that will add to the misery. Roads leading to the coast are already impassable, disappearing under rising tides that will be followed by a frightening surge of waves as the center of the storm hits later tonight. Most of those who have stayed have gone to special emergency shelters, like this one at the Civic Center. Hundreds of families will huddle here tonight, their homes abandoned until the worst is over. Many fear they'll have no homes left.
We're keeping our fingers crossed there for a second. We hope that it will be there tomorrow, but you never know.
If the winds don't go up above 150 miles an hour, I hope to find the apartments together.
I think we can always start all over again. As long as we are alive, we can start all over again.
Some will stay, not everyone's scared of hurricanes.
The first one I was in was in 1933, and I haven't ever left for any yet. I've never had any trouble.
There's been no panic so far, but queues began to form at the few petrol stations still open today. Nearly every business has put up the shutters, although local ranchers have had to leave their livestock to fend for themselves.
B104, it's Dusty Hayes in the B104 newsroom. We do have confirmation of a couple of more tornadoes in the valley area. Remember now,
local radio stations are warning of tornadoes accompanying the hurricane. It's added to the alarm here. Tornadoes generate winds of up to 250 miles an hour and can cause appalling damage. Brownsville faces a long and very frightening night. The anxiety of waiting is heightened by uncertainty. Uncertainty about just how violent and dangerous this storm will be. Uncertainty about how much of the town will be left when it's gone. Tim Hewitt, News at 10, Brownsville, Texas.
Despite Hurricane Gilbert, NASA officials were confident enough tonight to name the date for the next shuttle launch. Discovery is now scheduled to take off from Cape Canaveral on the 29th of September, 2.5 years after the Challenger disaster. It had been feared the storms would disrupt the launch plans.
A state of emergency has been declared on the island of Jamaica, where 26 people have died in the hurricane. 500,000 are homeless. Jamaica's High Commission in London has started an emergency appeal fund.
Jamaicans desperate for food pushed their way into the first supermarket to open since Hurricane Gilbert brought chaos to the island. Fresh water in barrels is being distributed in plastic containers. Food and water is now in short supply. The Jamaican Prime Minister has ordered the police to force shops to open tomorrow. He said the state of emergency would help Jamaica to recover from the worst hurricane this century. In London, Jamaica's acting High Commissioner held a crisis meeting with West Indian community leaders to launch an appeal fund.
The government's got to rebuild an economy that's been shattered in, a few hours. The tourism industry is probably not going to even come back for another year. The crops were building up nicely. That's all gone. Hospitals devastated, schools, homes. You know, there's a lot to be built. We need to rebuild Jamaica.
With 500,000 people in temporary shelter, the Jamaican government says it needs £200 million to get the island back to normal.
The bank manager kidnapped by an armed gang described today how they held a gun to his head during his 18-hour ordeal. Mr. Roger Ball was forced to open up his branch in Preston, where the gang stole at least £250,000. The bank is still calculating its losses. Police say the gang could already be abroad.
As customers queued outside the National Westminster Bank in Preston robbed yesterday, security men brought in fresh supplies of cash to replace some of that stolen, put by bank officials at over £250,000. The doors opened slightly later than usual, but all the bank staff, except the manager, were said to be back at work, despite being locked in the bank's vaults yesterday for nearly 2 hours. Police issued a sketch of one of the men they're seeking. He was seen by a passerby loading black plastic sacks into a car outside the bank. Today, bank manager Roger Ball said he watched television with the gunmen before they took him and his family to the bank. And he told of the moment he thought they were going to kill him.
I was placed on a chair at the far end of the building with my hands tied behind my back. I had had wax put in my ears and I had sticky tape over my eyes and glasses put on me. And I just felt, you know, for some reason that this may be done to you know, so I wouldn't hear the shot or something. I just had, it was just going through my mind, really.
Were you able to communicate at all with your wife and child during that time?
I had no knowledge where my wife and child were at that time.
Tonight, the family was all together at their home in Morecambe. Mr. Ball asked the press for a weekend of peace and quiet for him and his family. Mark Webster, News at 10, Preston.
In flooded Bangladesh, the first substantial help is getting through. In the forefront, British helicopter crews. A report next. Plus, the Jockey Club tells Lester Piggott, give us a ring. That's in a couple of minutes.
Rogers? Yeah? They're coming off. Do what you can.
We can offer you $0.25. Okay, I'll buy 50 at best.
We may be able to cross it.
Okay, fine, Mark. There's no one said it was a joke. I'll offer you $0.25 and leave me the balance at work.
Up to our accident, time may change me, but I can't trace time. Strange fascination, fascination. Our changes are taken, the face I'm going through. Changes, face the strange changes. Look out, you rock and rollers.
We have just witnessed 24 years of change. But in all these years, not once has Hansen changed its philosophy of investing in basic industries, supplying needs that will never go away, whether boom or recession, whatever fashion dictates or politicians say. So in all these years, not one has gone by without an increase in profits, in dividends, and in earnings per share. Hansen, the company from over here that's also doing rather well over there.
More heavy rains across Bangladesh have worsened the misery for millions already homeless in the floods which are now covering 3/4 of the country. But despite the rain and more forecast for tomorrow, the waters are gradually receding. Some 25 million people are still without homes. ITN's Des Hamill has flown north from Dhaka to see how the aid is getting through to the homeless.
Fields are taking shape again as the floodwaters begin, at last, to seep away. But across this endless flat countryside, the next rice harvest has already been lost. They say if you don't plant by the middle of September, that's today, there'll be no harvest in November. Relief comes in by air. Today we flew with helicopters sent as part of Saudi Arabia's contribution, with British crews from Aberdeen. Below, roads were beginning to emerge, linking communities cut off from each other for the past fortnight. It's difficult flying. This drop is on a road, water on each side. Soldiers and villagers race to offload bags of lentils. There's not a moment to lose. The rotor blades keep turning all the time. The bags are piled up. The helicopter takes off. Another small community has been supplied for another week or so. Further north, yet another Saudi helicopter, again with a British crew, who normally fly to the North Sea oil rigs. You can hear their voices as they search for a place to land. They're bringing in medical supplies for Save the Children's most remote outpost on the edge of the Jamuna River. Below, villagers swarm out. This is the first supply drop they've had, the first outsiders they've seen for ages. 1,500 kilos of supplies underslung. It's not an easy job. Slowly, the pilot inches down. And once down, once again, the load is whisked away. The pace is frantic. The boxes are swept along in a huge crowd of people, jostling, pushing, eager to help. In the calm of the compound, the boxes are opened. And Alex Gray, Save the Children's field director, hands them over to the project manager. Much-needed supplies. There's a small feeding station here. There are so many malnourished children across the country, but in not quite such a bad shape as we've seen in other places. As the rain came down again, the Saudi helicopter was waiting. Another supply drop finished, many more to come.
So great excitement here tonight. That's the first airdrop they've had for a month, and those supplies will keep them going until the main routes are open once again. Desmond Hamill, News at 10, Pulla Candy.
A British secret agent, a woman, has told the Gibraltar inquest into the deaths of 3 IRA bombers that she was petrified when the shooting started. Agent J said she had never heard gunfire before, and she was not expecting it.
The one and only runway that comprises Gibraltar's airport was a convenient departure point for the SAS and the MI5 officers who've now completed their evidence. At the military base alongside, a canvas tent covers the doorway leading to their quarters. The vans which delivered them to the court picked up and dropped off beneath the canopy. One of them, Agent J, went behind the curtains today. A woman, one of the surveillance agents, she described how she'd followed Savage. She saw him spin round on hearing the gunshots which had killed Farrell and McCann 100 yards away. Simultaneously, she heard a police car siren. She said Savage had a stunned look on his face and she turned her back. Mr. Paddy McGrory for the families asked, "Did you turn away because you knew what was going to happen next?" "No, sir," she said. "Fire was open," said Mr. McGrory. "I know, sir," said Agent J. She said that although she'd heard McCann and Farrell being shot, She hadn't heard the 16 rounds which killed Savage, although she was only 15 feet away. Colin Baker, News at 10, Gibraltar.
Here, the Jockey Club said disciplinary inquiry when he's released from prison. It said his conviction for tax evasion may have brought racing into disrepute, but because of his past service to the sport, it will take no further action. Mr. Piggott will now be free to ask for a new trainer's licence.
When Lester Piggott was sent to prison, some in the racing world thought his career on the turf was at an end. Stripped of his trainer's licence and then of his OBE, it seemed that Piggott's luck had run out. But now, a year after he boarded the prison bus, the Jockey Club are saying he's suffered enough, and they don't want a disciplinary inquiry.
He may have caused serious injury to racing. However, in view of the fact that through his term of imprisonment, he is in effect already serving a year's disqualification, and mindful of his services to racing in the past, they've decided to take no further action. In other words, not to have an inquiry to see if he was in breach.
Mr. Piggott could be back at his stables as early as next month. He's eligible for parole in 5 weeks. He may not want a trainer's licence straight away, but if he does after tonight's announcement, the betting must be that he would get it. His wife, Susan, who's been running the stables in his absence and is recovering well from a riding accident, is believed to be delighted at the partial rehabilitation.
And still with racing, the nationalised bookie, the Tote, could be in line for privatisation. But the Home Office says it first wants to make sure that wouldn't have an adverse effect on racing. Last year, the Tote contributed £3 million to the sport. The Defence Secretary, Mr. Younger, who was at the races today, thinks the idea might be a runner.
The Tote is a peculiarly British organisation. Owned by the state, it has a monopoly on pool betting. That means all the money on a race goes into a pot. The Tote takes out about 30%, and what's left is divided amongst winners. It was created to put money into the sport. Last year it gave £2.5 million to racecourses. It's very profitable and wants to expand.
The very fact of the existence of a strong Tote means that the ordinary bookmaker who is not betting at Tote odds has got to look out very carefully to make sure he's not being overtaken by the value to the punters of the Tote dividend.
But the bookies fear unfair play.
I think we would be very interested in seeing that the statutory advantages they currently enjoy were no longer there.
The government would probably not allow owners of betting shops to hold more than 10% of the shares, either individually or in aggregate. The idea is to spread ownership.
Could we make it more responsive to what the public want, and could we make it continue to make as good or even better contribution towards racing? And if it does all that, then it'll be worth making a change when the end of this study comes.
And the reaction from the race meeting at Ayr today?
At present, only 1.5% of all money wagered on racehorses is with the nanny goat, the affectionate name for the Tote. Why not float the Tote? The punters are asking.
This study will have to deal with more than just the commercial aspects of a possible privatisation. It will have to balance the interests of the government, the prospective shareholders and the racing fraternity. The irony is that after today's big race, the Gold Cup at Ayr, won by So Careful at 33-1, the Tote paid out more than the bookies.
Cricket, Worcestershire have won the Britannic Assurance County Championship. They beat Kent by a single point today. Kent think they should actually have had one more point, but Lord says they asked for it too late. Worcester easily beat Glamorgan, so Kent's win over Surrey wasn't enough. Today's play at Worcester started late after overnight raiders damaged the pitch.
At Canterbury, Chris Cowdrey didn't know of the sabotage drama at Worcester to begin with, but his team, led by Player of the Year Chris Penn, soon blasted away any resistance Surrey might have offered on a wicked pitch. When Ellison took the last wicket, the young Kent side had done all they could for their fans, winning with maximum bonus points and a day and a half to spare. Their fate was now in others' hands. There was champagne in case the saboteurs or the weather could nick it for them, and a philosophical outlook on a mixed summer from the captain.
My biggest ambition was to win the championship with Kent. The England thing is neither here nor there. This is what we wanted, and we're nearly there. We're champions at the moment, albeit only for perhaps a few hours.
But at Worcester, the saboteurs hadn't done enough. All hands to the pump with vacuums, sand and dryers, and the oil and Vaseline poured on the pitch overnight was gone. Only an hour was lost. After that, Worcester weren't in the mood to muck about, Newport taking 4 quick wickets. And bottom of the table Glamorgan didn't seem to have the stomach for a fight. The final wicket was another slog. Worcester had the title for the first time in 14 years. Teammates acknowledged the massive contribution Graham Hick had made to their season with almost 3,000 runs.
Come up on the blind side and we've put our nose in front with 1 game to go. It's a fantastic feeling.
So proud of the lads, just very pleased to be part of it.
The great thing is, really, they've managed to do it without UMAPs this season.
That could be the secret.
Confident Worcester now go for a third title in the Refuge on Sunday, but for the moment it was all about celebrating. Giles Smith, ITN Sport, Worcester.
Tonight, soccer, Barclays League Division 4. Doncaster 1, Torquay 2, Halifax 3, Terry McPhillips got them all, Carlisle 3, Stockport 0, Burnley 0, they were fighting on the terraces there, Tranmere 1, Cambridge 2, Wrexham 2, Colchester 2.
Just the main story again, a teenage gymnast, Lisa Grayson, picked today for the Olympics, couldn't make it to Heathrow in time to get to Seoul. Alistair.
And last, you can see the opening ceremony of the Olympics live on Channel 4 from 11:15 tonight. ITV and Channel 4 will have live coverage of the Games and Britain's medal hopes throughout the fortnight. That's it tonight. Good night.
Good evening. The number of dead seals washed up on the Norfolk coast, victims of the canine distemper virus, is still rising rapidly. The National Trust, who are monitoring the situation, say it could be 50 years before the damage can be repaired. Charlie Lee Potter reports.
Nearly 100 dead seals have been washed up on Norfolk's beaches in the last week. Council staff, more used to collecting household rubbish, have been working 12 hours a day to retrieve the bodies. The National Trust have been monitoring the situation at Blakeney Point, an area renowned for its seal colony, once home to 700 seals. But in recent weeks, 200 bodies have been retrieved from the shingle here. Many more seals are thought to have died at sea. The seal...
As the crisis worsens, the first major investigation into North Sea pollution began in Great Yarmouth today. The £10 million 5-year project will study the effects of chemical and sewage dumping. A report from Alistair Yates, who's been speaking with scientists on the Challenger expedition.
The Challenger will be based in Great Yarmouth during the 17-month investigation. Today, the crew were making final checks on the sophisticated equipment to be used. Funded by the Natural Environment Research Council, there are 100 scientists involved in the study who want to prove conclusively what effect pollution is having on the North Sea.
We do have evidence that the North Sea could be in trouble. There are particular areas of the North Sea which do, for example, become anoxic at certain parts of the year, where all life on the seabed simply dies. Whether this is going to happen in a more general way, of course, we don't know. And at the end of this project, perhaps we'll be closer to some of those answers.
A Suffolk police constable today ended a high-speed chase through 3 counties by diving through the door of a stolen bread van and overpowering the driver. He's been praised for bringing the chase to a peaceful end. David Jennings reports.
The chase started in Norwich early today after a 13-ton lorry loaded with bread was taken from Allied Bakeries in Vulcan Road. In the 2.5 hours that followed, it covered 100 miles. The lorry took first to the A47 and made for Acle. There it turned off to Stalham and then Wroxham. Next it headed back to Norwich and out on the A11 to Kilverston. The lorry then turned on to back roads, passing East Harling before rejoining the A11 and going into Thetford. Its journey continued to Barton Mills and Newmarket town centre and then took in a number of villages before reaching Saxham. Here, as the lorry slowed down on a sharp double bend, PC Bob Hazelton, who'd been in pursuit, jumped from his car, ran alongside the lorry and dived in. He overpowered the driver and pulled the vehicle to the side of the road.
4 animal rights campaigners from the Northampton area have been convicted of trying to steal a performing dolphin worth £25,000. The dolphin, called Rocky, is the star attraction at a marine park in Morecambe, where the 4 men were arrested carrying a net, ropes and a homemade stretcher. Today, a judge called it a totally irresponsible scheme which could have killed the 24-year-old dolphin. The ringleaders, Mel Broughton and Barry Bourne, both from Northampton, were given suspended jail sentences and fined £500. James O'Donnell from Ravensthorpe and James Buckner from Bicester were also heavily fined. Well, that's the news in the region tonight. A look now at the weather. It'll be rather cloudy overnight. Tomorrow the cloud will break during the morning to give sunny intervals in most places. It'll become a little warmer with temperatures up to 19 degrees.
On Anglia Sunday at 9:30, an IRA man turns informer in act of betrayal.
Yes, sir.
It's about the London bombing. I've got some information for you.
You've got to get out of here within 20 minutes.
But no matter where they bury scum like McGurk, we can dig them up.
Act of betrayal, Sunday at 9:30, concluding Monday at 9 on Anglia.
When you're busy running a business, you simply haven't got time to run the office. So who's looking after the company loos? Are they spotlessly clean? The building needs some maintenance work. Its high-time reception had a fresh lick of paint. The security system needs updating. And the windows could do with a clean...
Mr. Horner at BET.
At BET, we specialize in support services. Whatever your problem, we'll take it off your hands. Phone us on 0800 010122.
At precisely midnight every Friday, something mind-bogglingly wonderful happened to the inhabitants of the planet Earth. It was called Saturday. To celebrate this event, the Daily Telegraph produced a weekend section to cover every conceivable interest from the countryside to the cinema, from fine art to fine wine. And in September 1988, it introduced a weekend color magazine to cover just about everything else, which made the Daily Telegraph the perfect newspaper, even for those who enjoyed nothing more at the weekend than a really good read. The Daily Telegraph, the Earth Dweller's Guide to Life, the Weekend, and everything.
Nobody does it better. Makes me feel sad for the rain. Nobody does it half as good as you. 'Cause baby, you're the best. Nobody does it better. Oh, makes me feel sad for the rain. Nobody does it quite the way you do. Baby, 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 you're the best.
Graham and Brian have just retired. Graham chose a Norwich Union pension, Brian didn't.
We'll manage perfectly well with what we've put by.
Graham can continue to enjoy life to the full. Brian's trying to cope too.
There's a few miles left in this car yet.
Graham and his wife are just off on holiday, while Brian...
Our front garden's good enough for us.
Graham enjoys real peace of mind at night with the strength and security of a Norwich Union pension. And Brian?
We'll get by all right. The house is worth a bob or two. And there's your savings as well, aren't there, love? Love?
Don't just take our word for it. Take independent financial advice too about the performance of a pension from Norwich Union.
The bottle's green, but don't adjust your set. It's new Domestos Fresh with a directable jet. It kills germs dead, and it clings real well. What's so new? It's got a fresh smell. Big Dom. So when cleaning your toilet, just follow your nose and choose one of the bathroom's big heroes. 'Cause remember, folks, whether green or blue, there's no meaner germ killer in your loop. Big Dom. Big Bad Dom.
Rosary Road, Norwich, Wednesday, August the 10th. Soon after midnight, two girls are woken by an armed intruder.
Come on, get in the other room with your friend.
There's a man in the house.
Right, get your clothes off. Come on, get your clothes off. It's either that or you're going to get your throat slit.
Both girls were repeatedly threatened. When they refused, he began demanding money.
I've only got about 50 quid, it's in there.
Just throw it on the floor.
The man made off with £70. Crime Stoppers need your help to find him. Ring free phone 0800 555 222. You don't have to give your name or number, and you could earn a Community Action Trust reward. If you have information about this or any serious crime, ring 0800 555 222 now.